George Bush needed a Pearl Harbor and they wanted to blame it on Afghanistan. That was because of Berdosco. I'm the only person I know that met Berdosco Corporation in 1999. I knew what to look for over there. And that involved Turkmenistan, that involved Afghanistan, and also Pakistan. And the target was the port of Gwadar, Pakistan, and Balochistan province. During the USSR-Afghan War, Osama bin Laden was the head of the Mujahideen, which is now called Al-Qaeda. Anytime the United States wants to pull out a terror threat, it's always Al-Qaeda. But most people do not understand the United States created Al-Qaeda. It used to be called the Mujahideen. The Pentagon had a planning team trying to figure out how they could go in there, take part of Balochistan and take the Gwadar port back away from Pakistan and also China. And evidently there may be a few sane people in the Pentagon that probably told President Bush, oh, by the way, if we do this, we're going to be at war with Pakistan and also China, and we're going to be wiped out. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, 2 U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. We found corporate registrations in 16 states. And when you track all that down, you find the name, and then all of that points straight back to the World Trade Center, you know you're onto a trail. Okay, when the same names keep connecting over and over again.
How are the lawsuits from 1987 connected to what happened in 2001?
They lost an asbestos lawsuit of $6 billion. Basically, the World Trade Center was condemned.
Watch Federal Post. Bold and independent.
Hello, welcome to Talking Politics. I'm Hassan Zafar. This is the second part of Carl's interview. We'll continue from where we left in the previous one. So let's go ahead with it. So these three things: why, how, and who. So why is the motive part.
Yeah.
And the motive is oil and gas resources.
It's also control of trillions of dollars worth of oil and gas. That's a big motive.
Right. So how did it happen?
My best estimate is somewhere around 1994, after the first bombing of World Trade Center failed to bring the building down. That was February 26, 93. And during the trial, after that happened, Bill Clinton fired the FBI director, who was one of the best FBI directors I've ever seen, because he had initiated an internal investigation of who in the FBI was involved in that bombing. That actually came out of the trial, that the FBI had fingerprints on that first bombing.
Of the World Trade Center.
Yeah. But the investigation we found as early as 1994, there were some steps being taken to figure out how to bring those towers down.
Okay, so the planning to bring the towers down started in 94.
In 94.
Okay. And then 7 years to execute the plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Then, and this has come out from multiple pieces. Some of it's from me. Kurt Weldon, he's gone public this year with Tucker Carlson and also with Clayton Morris. What he's been exposing is that Osama bin Laden was not even in Afghanistan.
Where was he?
And due to that November 21st interview in 2001 that you read when we first started, Hamid Mir, he's a very famous columnist.
Yes, and he rose to prominence after that interview. Nobody knew him before that.
Yeah. Now, if you back up and start looking at it a little different, that interview was it was claimed to be the last interview with Osama bin Laden. And then Kurt Weldon comes out this year about the same time I did. What's hilarious is how many people think I'm a 9/11 newbie. Hell, I was involved in 9/11 investigation before 9/11, And then when 9/11 happened, we turned the burner up to nuke, okay? I mean,
And
there
how,
were three
and
of
how
them.
did you get involved in the investigation before 9/11, after 94? And
That's because I met Bridos Corporation. They told me what they had achieved in the Caspian Basin with all three nations and all four parties: Turkmenistan, General Rashid Dostum, the Taliban, and also Pakistan. So that was that step. So I was watching what was going on over there. And if you remember in our first attempt on this, we were talking about Obama when he got into office. He started droning the hell out of Pakistan. And what I've always viewed that as is the United States was trying to bully Pakistan to walk away from the CPEC.
Okay.
And I admire Pakistan for standing firm. The United States does not own this world, and they don't own the right to the resources. If they can't do a business deal like China does without resorting to violence, this is an old saying about violence. If you have to resort to violence, you've already lost.
And during this span of 7 years, 94 to 2001, Pakistan also conducts the nuclear tests in 98.
Yeah.
And when President Clinton summons Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to Washington, and Kargil takes place in 99. So other things have also happened during this time.
Exactly. But I've tried to tell the 9/11 people from day one, you can't focus on just the day and understand it. You can't understand what led up to it. You make families solve why it happened and how they did it. And Richard Gage has done that with his group. But then you have to understand what happened after that.
Yes, we'll come to that. But before, I want to understand, where was Osama bin Laden if he wasn't in Afghanistan or even in Pakistan?
That's what Kurt Weldon shared. He was in Wadiz, Iran, and he was being treated periodically at a Iranian military hospital. I wish he would have shared what he was being treated for, because my people found this out, and I can't figure out why he didn't know it. Maybe he just didn't. Maybe he forgot to mention it. He was being treated for kidney failure.
Okay, he was sick because
he was that sick, and that interview with Hamid Mir.
So the Iranian hospital should have the record of his treatment in whichever hospital he was. Why haven't Iranians shared it with the world as yet?
Well, if we could get Iran to do that, that would help. We also know now, and this is Kurt Weldon, not me, who allowed Osama into Iran was the IRG General Qasem Soleimani.
Yes, the one who got assassinated himself.
Yeah, and what I personally think, I think the neocons and maybe even the CIA gave Trump some bad information. Qasem Soleimani was one of the few people in the Middle East that was trying to repair the damage that George Herbert Walker Bush and George W. Bush did to the Mideast peace. I mean, it totally wrecked it.
Yeah,
and they did it intentionally.
Let me also add here what Barbara shared with me, and you know that from the interview.
Yes, I watched it very intensely.
That Osama was in Iran, and he was going to be another version of Imam Khomeini for Saudi Arabia, and the Saudi monarchs, the family, was not happy with that, and they wanted to get rid of Osama bin Laden, and he was gotten rid of in 2000, before 2000, or maybe around 2001. and he was
I-
assassinated far before when it actually happened in Ahmedabad. Like,
he
some people
really
say
was.
2006, some say 2001. I don't know. There are different dates available.
Well, I've heard 2001. My people say that he died of kidney failure 2004 to 2006.
Okay.
And I don't think who was killed in Abbottabad was Osama bin Laden. I think it may have been somebody that was getting ready to team up with the Taliban and start bringing the end to the U.S. presence there. And it may have been somebody high level in Ahmad Shah Massoud's army, because after everything started over there, they fled into Waziristan, and some of them were actually in Pakistan. And that may be who they actually took out, because the CIA is all over the place over there. They're always sticking their nose in everything. In fact, Kurt Weldon was talking about his sources. One of the sources that told him where Osama was, he was a falcon trainer. He had trained the entire royal family. Walked into his office with $2 million falcons on his shoulders and said he wanted to go over there because Osama bin Laden's falcons had been seen. I don't know how they mark them. I don't, evidently you can tell who owns what. I've never done falconing, so I hope a gun, not a bird. But yeah,
One thing becomes certain. One thing nevertheless becomes certain, that whatever happened in Abbottabad that night, it was not Osama bin Laden there.
I don't think there was any way it was. Now, as far as him being a threat to the Saudis, a lot of people don't know this. What was going on in Afghanistan and Turkmenistan to wreck Badass Corporation was Unical, which actually had been reduced down considerably. A big chunk of Unical was sold to Venezuela. George Herbert Walker Bush approved the sale himself. Anytime there's a foreign buyer, they have what they call CFIUS. That's the Committee for Foreign Investment in the U.S. They sold all the Citgo stations. They sold some of the pipelines. They sold a few minor oil fields to Venezuela. And we'll get back to that in just a minute, because I know what the problem with Venezuela really is. But they needed the money to go over to try to be big boys from Turkmenistan to Afghanistan to Pakistan to that port. Now, they've now been bought out by Chevron. Chevron stepped in to see if they could help push us through. But the United States cannot get it through its thick skull. They're not welcome over there. Badass Corporation was welcome. They have the whole deal sewed up.
Why did the Pakistanis remain quiet on this issue? Because I remember the statement of the Pakistani Foreign Secretary, Bashir Ahmed, I think it was that time. He said, you don't need to look back, you need to look forward. Whatever happened, let's sleep over it.
Well, sometimes when I hear somebody say that, they may be trying to cover something up.
Yeah, because if Osama bin Laden was not there in that compound, he was never there. And of course, the Pakistani authorities knew that. And even then, they chose to stay quiet on it. They made no claims of the story being untrue.
This is a question, because I don't know. Is Hamid Mir still alive?
He did survive. He thrived.
Maybe you need to interview him.
No, I was actually wondering that Hamid Mir goes to interview Osama bin Laden. And after that, the Americans launched a whole huge military campaign in Afghanistan to hunt him down. Why don't you go and ask him, where is he? You went to interview him. Take us there. It was just one man who could do that.
Well, it was known in the United States that CNN interviewed him.
Yeah. So why couldn't those journalists just take you there? You didn't have to bomb every cage in Afghanistan. You wanted to
Exactly.
smoke them out. Remember the phrase, we'll smoke him out.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But remember, when you open with that statement by Hamid Mir about Osama bin Laden,
Yeah.
Mullah Muhammad Omar opened that interview by stating that they knew within 5 years before that if they would not allow the United States to build that pipeline across there, they would attack us and blame it on Osama. And that was in November 2001. That was shortly after the bombing started.
Mm.
That's why I put it in my book.
Yeah. So who did it?
Who did it?
Trade Center. Yeah, that's the best part of it because that's why you are being hunted, rounded up all across the world, everywhere in Europe, because
I
you're
can tell
in
you,
possession of those photographs. So let's be out with that story.
I can tell you that there's only one Islamic person that's a named defendant, and he's from Kuwait. The rest of the defendants are Americans. Now, the guy from Kuwait, if you turn back the clock to October 1990, let me start just before that, okay?
Okay.
After my book came out, I got a phone call from a U.S. Special Forces soldier. He was retired. He was a veteran. And he asked me, he said, my car's broke down. He said, I heard you on the radio 2 nights ago. He said, I've already read your book. He said, I want to meet you face to face and tell you something that I haven't heard yet, but I want it on the record. I said, okay. I said, where are you? He was about a 4-hour drive from me. And I drove up there the next morning. We met for breakfast and lunch. He was involved in black ops. He was a platoon leader before Saddam Hussein even invaded Kuwait.
Okay.
And he said everybody over there knows that the Kuwaitis and U.S. oil companies has stolen 6 to 7 billion in oil from Iraq, Basra oil fields. They use what's called directional drilling. Some people call it slant drilling. They were sucking the oil out of Iraq for the Kuwaitis and U.S. oil companies. George Herbert Walker Bush, the Pentagon, sent black ops over there posing as Kuwait Navy, and they were shooting on Iran and they were shooting at Iraq just to stir up tensions. They were trying to goad Saddam into moving in. And then I have a photograph of this. The U.S. ambassador over there was April Glaspie, and she's sitting there in Saddam Hussein's office telling him, we have no interest in this Arab dispute. They wouldn't step in and help resolve it. And that's basically like, telling him, oh, if you want your 6 or 7 billion, go get it yourself. And with all the shooting that was going on months before he invaded by U.S. soldiers posing as Kuwait Navy, that right there really stuck in my gut. I had people in the Pentagon verify those black ops, and they also verified, yes, he was a platoon leader of Platoon 3. They had 4 platoons over there, posing as Kuwait Navy, shooting at Iran and Iraq to stir up tension. Then, after he did invade, we had this tearful thing in the United States where a 15-year-old girl, her name is Nayira. She didn't say what her last name is. She's sitting there literally with tears running down about all these atrocities she saw in a hospital in Kuwait City, where the Kuwaitis were throwing dead, newborns out of incubators and allowing them to die on the floor while they stole the incubators. It didn't happen. She was the 15-year-old daughter of the Kuwait ambassador to the U.S. Her last name was Al Sabah.
Al Sabah.
Yeah. Now imagine this. Involved in the World Trade Center, involved in how they brought those towers down, was Mashali S. Sabah, that relative. And when all of that was investigated about her lies and about the invasion that went into, Desert Storm, they termed her testimony as modern atrocity propaganda. That was actually investigated very quietly in the U.S. Modern atrocity propaganda. Voila. They did it one time. They did it again. It's called September 11th, 2001. And we have the evidence to prove that in court.
That
I mean,
this Kuwaiti ambassador Al Sabah was central to all of what happened on 9th of September 2001.
Yeah, but Hassan, it goes even deeper. Kuwait for decades, all the way back to BCCI, they have been a money laundering conduit for the CIA.
Yeah, BCCI. That was a big scam in Pakistan too, and the chief executive of that bank was a Pakistani, as far as I remember.
Yep, but also who got hosed on that deal was the what's the king's name of Abu Dhabi? Nahyan.
Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan.
Yeah, they got hosed for billions on that deal by the CIA. So I mean, when they start weaving their web, I keep hoping they're going to get trapped in it. This time, based on the information we have and the evidence we could take to court, I think they got caught in their own web of lies. And like I said, I want people to look at the bigger picture. There are 1,000 touch points that all point back to the destruction of the World Trade Center.
Yeah. So would you like to elaborate this BCCI connection a little bit more? Is it the same bank that was founded in 1972 by Agha Hassan Abidi, a Pakistani financier? Is that the one you're talking about?
That's the one I'm talking about.
All right. So what's the?
But this Kuwaiti family was in bed with that.
Okay.
And they have been a money laundering conduit. Now let's back up one minute. I want to get this on the record tonight.
Sure.
It's a given that George Bush knew he had lost the Gwadar port in 2002. He had especially lost it by 2006 when China went full operation on the China-Pakistan economic corridor. I mean, that's a given, okay?
Right.
Why in the hell would the United States stay for 20 more years? Or if you give them a little bit of grace, back off 4 years, 16 years. Why did they stay?
Why would they stay?
We didn't know the answer to that until this year.
Until this year, 2025.
This year.
Okay.
This year.
So what's the revelation?
When Donald Trump had Elon Musk and his experts establish DOGE, Department of Governmental Efficiency, and they focused first on U.S. aid. Most Americans know U.S. aid is nothing but a front for the CIA. Okay.
Yes.
That's how they get in the door. They look like aid, but it's not aid.
Yes.
300 million from U.S. aid to Afghan farmers.
Okay.
And then another payment of 330 million U.S. aid to Afghan farmers.
Right.
That was to raise poppies for heroin production.
Okay.
Now, when the Taliban prevailed, they destroyed every one of those fields. I have photographs of U.S. and NATO soldiers guarding those fields from the Taliban destroying them.
Okay. And where was that money going, the heroin money?
I have no idea.
But
but a lot of it,
there must be some interest in that. Well, that's why they were
well,
guarding.
a lot of that money, may have been going back through Kuwait because they've been doing it with them for years.
Hmm.
So the tip of that, Barbie kept saying tip of the iceberg, tip of the iceberg. We're looking at about 2/3 of the iceberg.
So when this Elon Musk's department digs it out, what happens then? Is that he was in trouble and he had to resign a few days ago?
No, he was getting hammered on Tesla and everything else. It was really weird. Everybody started calling him a Nazi, and they're attacking Tesla dealerships. They're burning Tesla cars.
The dispensation of these titles and labels is the best way to bring anyone down.
Yeah, I mean, you just paint a picture. Oh, you're a Nazi. Yeah, right.
You just assign a label. That's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think this whole thing, the only way to resolve it, I'm going to tell you a brief and short story.
Yeah.
My parents divorced when I was 9. My father was a World War II veteran with George Patton's army.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't come home physically injured, but he came home kind of mentally, out of it. And I was born in 1951. My mother remarried. My stepfather was a U.S. Treasury CID officer. He was part of the Department of Justice Anti-Mafia Task Force.
Okay.
I mean, he took on some huge cases. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There was one case up in New Jersey, New York. They arrested 72 people and they got 69 convictions.
Mm-hmm.
And these people went down hard. But he was one of the people that was sent to New Orleans to arrest Jim Garrison, prosecutor. And they confiscated all of his files because he was getting ready to sue the United States government for the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even see him for 2 weeks. I mean, I was in high school. I was, going through my regular schedule. And one morning I walked into the breakfast room and he's sitting there. I mean, he's on like his 10th cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, did you finish? And he goes, yeah. I said, what do you think? He said, what do I think? He said, that Warren Commission report that your step uncle in the U.S. House gave you with his signature and his personal words to you, throw it in the trash. Complete cover up.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a few years after JFK was, assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, never trust the U.S. government to investigate its own criminal activity.
Here's a catch call. President Trump decides to declassify JFK case, whatever it was. Now it's, I don't know, partially or fully, it's out in the public now.
Well, it's JFK, RFK, and Martin Luther King. And every one of those cases had the same answer. Either the FBI or the CIA had fingerprints on those murders, okay? In fact, on JFK, you had a joint chief of staff general in the CIA conspiring to kill Kennedy. Now, there's a big difference in that one and what's going on right now, because everybody that was involved in the assassination of those 3 people are dead. There's nobody to take to court. There's nobody to prosecute and put them away.
And the people involved in the assassination, the so-called assassination of Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, they are also dead.
Yes.
They mysteriously died, all of them together.
Yeah, but the problem I have with trying to get a presidential commission are trying to let this representative Anna Paulina Luna, who I have communicated with, or even now Senator Ron Johnson, to dig into this. They're not going to be allowed to conduct a criminal investigation of who we have on our defendant list. Because, like I said, the defendants are all American plus one Kuwaiti. There's no Saudis. The Saudis were business partners. What they did do, and we would have a hard time, trying to prosecute them. They helped the CIA create this illusion that there was going to be some radical, Islamic males flying jets against targets in the U.S. And it's like I said when we were talking here, there was no Islamic person on those 4 jets, period.
Right. So what about those 15 Saudis, their names? We never heard anything from them, their families. Nobody came up with any complaint, or they wanted to become part of this investigation, so their names were cleared off from whatever it was.
Well, I'm aware of a few things that may help solve that. Kurt Weldon and one other person, I can't remember his name right now. This was several years back. 2 of those alleged hijackers were on the CIA payroll. At least 6 or 7 of them were either Pentagon or they had trained for something on U.S. military bases. Muhammad Atta, I had 3 sources bring this to me. He's actually Egyptian intelligence, and he's a go-between CIA and Mossad, and sometimes he's a go-between between the CIA and Saudi GDI. I knew when I saw his photograph first time, he's not, this guy is not Saudi. He's Egyptian. Egyptians have a certain look about them.
Just looking at them, you can tell the difference, yes.
Yes. Now, another thing that came out, at least 6 or 7, including Muhammad Atta's father, went public right after it happened. They said, my son's still alive. I've talked to him. So what you're looking at here is either stolen ID. Now, another one, and this one really popped up. Kurt Weldon was talking about this. One of the Saudis, I can't remember the name he used, but because he was just blowing through information real fast with Tucker Carlson. I'll have to look at the video again. One of those Saudis, the United States government issued a formal written apology in Jeddah for defaming his name.
Yeah. So that's why I'm asking. The names of those 15 Saudis they were defamed, and their families must have felt the heat of it. And none of them came up asking for a remedy or a reinvestigation to clear up their names from the whole story.
One of the messages that I'm gonna get out with this video, I'll tell you later, not on the record here, where this video is going.
Right. Okay.
When I found out for fact that those 4 manifests, court ordered, there was not a single Arabic or Islamic person on those jets. As far as I'm concerned, Dan Hanley, me, you, all of Islam are exonerated. Now we need to drive that point home.
That's very interesting. So, did Pakistan have anything to do with this whole thing at all?
The only thing I can see is where the ISI director wired the money to Muhammad Atta. And I honestly think that was just part of the cover story. I mean,
so that's a small issue here.
Yeah, that's a very small issue. I know that Richard Armitage basically told Pakistan, either play along or will bomb you into the Stone Age.
Yeah, we remember that.
But we don't have time tonight for me to tell you what I know about Richard Armitage, and this goes all the way back to Vietnam.
So maybe another time in the next,
Maybe
we can talk about
maybe
it later on. Yes, and think about it. So maybe take a couple of days to think about it if it's the kind of story you want to tell on the record.
yeah. Well, Richard Armitage is a former Navy SEAL.
Mhm.
And there were some things going on in Vietnam that should have never happened. And I'm not talking war
Yeah,
crime.
because when I was talking to Barbara, there were frequent parallels drawn between Pearl Harbor and 9/11. And maybe
There are
next talk with her, I would like to explore that point even further.
there are some parallels, but there's even parallels between September 11th and COVID, why it happened, and who was behind it. And it's a repetitive pattern that needs to end. And Kurt Weldon, he calls them scumbags. And because they're making big money off of this chaos and off of these lies. And what I've been looking at and saying the whole time, I'm dealing with skunks and demons and monsters. Who's on this list and what they did and why they're on this list. It's a horror story.
Yeah, it is. Sounds like one.
I mean, when we
You are a survivor and in possession of some evidence, pictures, and the one you told me last time, so before we end this discussion today, the woman who actually was in possession of the first copy or the original copy of those pictures and the video, she was assassinated.
I'm trying to open a document here. I want to read you one paragraph. This is the opening statement of our lawsuit, okay?
Yeah.
And we've got the evidence to back this up. And I'll send you a copy of this as soon as we get off.
Oh yeah, I'll be happy to see that.
It's been said by wise and historically knowledgeable people throughout history that the first casualty in any war that's initiated by an aggressor is always the truth. There are previous court cases in multiple states in the United States District Court and state courts, even 2 U.S. Circuit Courts of the U.S. Court of Appeals, that shed light on why September 11th happened, why the World Trade Center was destroyed, and what the real motives and objectives were for creating that day of infamy. In short, the intentional and premeditated casualty named Truth was by the hands of the defendants in this lawsuit. It was nothing less than the premeditated and intentional assassination of the truth in shock and awe, horror story fashion by the defendants as their cover story to deflect attention away from long-planned crimes. And the reason I said that sentence, this goes all the way back to about 1989, okay? Mm-hmm. Any reader of this document will better understand these words that appear again in this overview: modern atrocity propaganda. The United States has used that ploy in many nations since George Herbert Walker Bush administration as an excuse for military intervention based on lies and fabricated intelligence, manipulation of facts to justify the inexcusable. And the source of modern atrocity propaganda is the al-Sabah family. So what they did in October 1990, that created Desert Shield and then Desert Storm. And it hasn't stopped. And I totally agree with Kurt Weldon. This must stop.
Thank you very much, Colin, for your time today. We are lucky that we were able to record this talk uninterrupted today, despite.
Let's go turn the VP on.
Thank you so much. So
Thank you.
Give you a call later on and try to get the
Yeah,
rest
you
of
have a good
the
evening, sir. I know it's late where you are.
Yes. So have a good evening too.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you
care.
very much for watching. There's a lot more to come.
A lot more to come.
Indeed.